No, it's real. But it can't do that. Shadows. I'm not an imposter. I'm not fake. Fake. Fake! Of course! If Orb can't handle ring shadows, let's just fake them. Hey, and welcome to this Making Planets Redux. Back in July 2019. 2019. Remember outdoors? Yeah, I'm not fussed about outdoors, that's why I have a YouTube channel about After Effects. Anyway, back in 2019 I published this tutorial showing how to add planetary rings to Saturn and have the planet cast shadows onto the rings. Cool, huh? Yeah, until ImFlow decided to post this question. And it has gnawed at me ever since. I don't think ImFlow was being malicious. It's just coincidental that he identified that I'm a fraud and a failure. This tutorial was nearly about abandoning Video Copilot Orb and using C4D Lite instead. But I really struggle to get good results with C4D Lite, and I much prefer the ease of use keeping everything in After Effects. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to create fake shadows for both the rings of the planet and the planet on the rings, all using the free VC Orb plugin. I'll then quickly show you how to use C4D Lite to achieve the same. Sounds like a lot, best get started. Here I am in After Effects with a 1080p comp. Just like with my first tutorial, I got the textures from Solar System Scope. We'll be covering some of the same ground that was in the original tutorial, but I'll try to keep it short. Drop in the Saturn 2K image, turn off visibility, and then go to Layer, New, Light. Make it a parallel light white and hit OK. Hit Enter and rename this Sun. Then go to Layer, New, Camera. And then Layer, New, Null Object. Make it 3D, hit Enter and rename this to Saturn Null. And finally for the moment, Layer, New, Solid. Make it comp size, hit OK. And rename this to Saturn. And then go to Effect, Video Copilot Orb. In Map, set the diffuse map to our Saturn 2K texture, and set the specular to 0. Select the Saturn Null layer, hit P to expose the position attributes, and now back on the Orb effect, hold the Alt key and click on the position stopwatch, and use the expression pick whip to link the Orb position to our Null Object's position. Expand the Sun's transform properties and use the pick whip to link the point of interest to Saturn Null's position, which means wherever we now move our Sun, its parallel light will always be pointing at our planet. Set its position to be -2000, -200, 0. This gives us a bit of an angle, and it's 2000 pixels away should I want to add a lens flare to it later. If I wasn't going to do that, it could be 2 pixels away. Okay, now for our rings. Go to Composition, New Composition. Set the width to be 1920 by 1080 and name it Rings. And drag in the Rings texture. Expand the transform properties and set the rotation to be 90 degrees. Uncheck the Constraint Proportions Infinity symbol on the Scale property and set X scale to 25. And drag Y scale up until the image passes the outside edge of the frame. And drag the position down until it's at the bottom of the frame. Now go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And go to Effect, Distort, Polar Coordinates. Set the type to rectopolar and crank it up to 100%. I've put this on an adjustment layer so that if I wished I could create other ring textures using fractal noise. I cover this at the 10-minute 30-second mark in the original tutorial. Now let's add our fake shadow. Rename the adjustment layer to Distort. Create another adjustment layer. Name this Shadow. And then go to Layer Solid Settings and change the width to match the height. In my case, 1080 pixels. Then click and hold on the mask tool to select the elliptical mask. And now double click on the tool to draw a circular mask on our adjustment layer. And then go to Effect, Color Correction, Tint, and set the white to black. And so now we've lost the whole ring. Not to worry, turn off the visibility for a moment and go back to our Saturn comp. Drag in our rings comp, make it 3D, and parent it to Saturn null. Hit R to expose the rotation controls and set X to be 90. Expand the layer settings and turn off Accept Lights and Accept Shadows in the Materials section. And we can't really see it, so use the Unified Camera tool to move up a bit. So, here's the problem we had in the original tutorial. I need some of the rings to appear behind Saturn. Duplicate the Saturn Orb layer by selecting it and going to Edit, Duplicate. Rename it to Saturn Matte. And move it above rings. Use the solo switch to show only the matte layer in the rings comp. And use the toggle switches and modes to set the rings to use the matte layer as an Alpha Invert Matte. Turn Saturn Matte back on for the moment. You may as well clear out the diffuse texture. And then set the type to Hemisphere. Select the camera layer and hit P to expose the position properties. And then back on Matte Orb setting, hold Alt and click on the Z rotation stopwatch. And in the expressions area type if, open brackets, then use the pick whip to select the camera's Y position. Then type less than, and use the pick whip to select Saturn null's Y position. And outside the closing bracket, open a curly bracket, 0, close curlies, else, open curly, 180, close curly. So what this is doing is flipping the hemisphere depending on the camera's height. And that's the original tutorial's trick. Unsolo the layers and turn off Saturn Matte. Okay, now for the shadows. Duplicate our Saturn null object and rename this to Shadow Pointer. And using the pick whip, link its position to Saturn null's position. Now I tried several variations on this and I expected LookAt would solve my problem, but it didn't. So instead I turned to expressions master Dan Ebberts. In the description below, copy the expression for the X rotation, and then hold Alt, click on the Shadow Pointer's X rotation stopwatch and paste it in. And do the same for the Y rotation expression. If I now move the sun around, you can see the Shadow Pointer respond to it. It does that weird flip, but we can counter that. Switch to our rings comp. Use a rectangular mask and mask off the left half of the circle. And switch the mask's mode to subtract. So we get a semicircle of shadow. Right click on the burger menu and choose Undock and drag it upwards. Now expand the transform controls for the shadow adjustment layer. And use the pick whip to link the rotation to the other comp's Shadow Pointer's Y rotation. Uncheck the scale infinity and hold Alt while clicking on the stopwatch to open the expressions area. And type angle equals. And then use the pick whip to link to the Shadow Pointer's X rotation, semicolon, new line, if, open brackets, angle is less than 0, close brackets, open curly brackets, angle equals angle times -1, close curlies. New line, S equals. And then use the expressions library to get interpolation, linear t, t-min, t-max, etc. Replace t with angle, t-min with 90, t-max with 180, value 1 with 0, value 2 with 500. And then on a new line after the linear expression, open square brackets, 35, S. You can now either close the comp or drag it back into the main timeline. And if I switch to the top view and move the sun back and forth, you can see how the shadow responds. And if I switch the view back to the camera and move the sun up and down, the scale of the adjustment layer is being determined by the angle of the Shadow Pointer's X rotation to the sun. pretty neat. Okay, so 9 pages in, and we've created a fake shadow which matches our original light-based shadow. Let's improve the situation. Create a new comp, set it to be 1080 by 540 pixels, and call it Shadow Text. Create a new white solid, make it comp sized. And now drag in our rings comp. And then go to Effect, Distort, Polar Coordinates. Leave it as rectopolar, but crank up the amount to 100%. We're undoing the original polar coordinates. And we're going to reverse the circle, as this will end up being our shadow, and we need the rings in reverse order. And then go to Effect, Distort, Transform, and set the scale to -150. We're going to be using the layer's scale later, so we can set the scale this way instead. And now add a second polar coordinates, and this time rectopolar 100%. Finally add a tint to make it all black. In the layer's scale settings, uncheck the constraint proportions and set the Y scale to -40 and set X to about 80%. Back in our main comp, drag in our new shadow text comp and turn it off. Duplicate the orb layer. And set the diffuse property to be our shadow comp. Check the unlit only option. Use the pick whip to set the Y's rotation to the shadow pointer's Y rotation. And set the layer to multiply. And the opacity to about 50%. And that's it. More or less. Yeah, you can tell from the playback bar there's more to come, but first there's an obligatory begging message about subscribing. Apparently I'm expected to treat you like 4-year-olds who can't possibly decide to subscribe because you like what you see, and instead need to be badgered with constant calls to action. Look, I know you're too smart not to subscribe. These asides are really for those dumb schmucks who don't understand how to press a button. Ahem. Remember that expression we use for the X rotation angle? I've got a variation on it in the description, but YouTube doesn't allow for angle brackets. So copy it from below and paste it into the ring's scale and replace the less than text with a less than symbol. Cool. And then paste in this expression into the opacity. This gets the rings to fade out as the sun's height gets to the horizon. And I do that because I have a duplicate rings rise to the top of the comp. Just copy that duplicate, rotate 180 degrees, and set the position to be Y equals 0. So if the sun is below the level of the rings, this one kicks in. You just have to replace the negative angles with positive ones. The project file contains this completed comp, but to be honest, this is really getting into the weeds and manually positioning it is probably all you'll ever need. Having said that, if you want a more accurate option and don't mind the animation and rendering being a little harder, then we have to use Cinema 4D Lite. To do that, go to File, New, Maxon Cinema 4D file. Save the file and C4D will open. Go to Create, Primitive, Sphere. Don't worry if it looks blocky, there's a Render Perfect option. Then in the Materials section, go to Create, New Default Material. And in the Color Texture section, add in our Saturn texture. And drag the material onto the sphere. Now for the rings. Create a plane. Make a new texture and add our rings texture to it. Then check the alpha box and use the same texture for the alpha channel. Add the texture to our plane. Now go to Create, Deformer, Bend. and in the Objects Manager drag Bend into the plane, and whack the strength up to 360 degrees. So it bends in a circle, it's just not the circle we wanted. In Bend's Coordinates tab, set the P rotation to 90 degrees. There we go, but it looks really odd. Click on the plane object, and if we increase the height segments, we get a better result. If I go to display Garage Shading with Lines, you can see what's going on. And I can move the Bend object on the X position to create a better ring. If I drop the plane's height to about 250 and the width to about 160, I get rid of that overlap. And if I hit F2 on the keyboard, I get a top view and can position the rings to line up with the planet. F1 returns to normal. Finally, I also have to make my light in C4D as that won't import. Create, light, light. Make it parallel. And set the shadows to hard, and you're done. Make sure the project settings are set to match your AE's settings. By default, this is only 3 seconds, 90 frames. Save your project, close C4D, and return to After Effects. Drag the file into your comp, and in the Cineware settings, choose Centered Comp Camera, and the renderer set to current. So what do you think? Is the Orb version too much of a hassle? Do you prefer Cinema 4D's shadows? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, please also get in touch if you get stuck. I'd love to see any projects that include my stuff, so post those too.